Please welcome David Ames.
Thank you. I've just had the stark realisation I'm actually too short to stand behind here, so I'm going to hover around here and look around, otherwise you'll just hear something, you won't be able to hear who's saying it. Thank you very much, Richard. It's an absolute pleasure to be here again and say a little bit about Letchworth. And I will zip through this quite quickly because I know that you're wanting your coffee. A very typical image of Letchworth and what you would expect when we talk about garden cities. But actually, is this a garden city? Is this a garden city of the future? And it's quite interesting. I get the odd house build of all sizes come to us and say, David, we've got this fantastic garden city scheme, and we would like you to stamp your approval on this, say the Ebenezer Howard approval almost on this garden city scheme. So, wow, that's very interesting. So, what do you think makes it a garden city? They say, well, it's got trees and it's got some houses that look like that. That's a garden city, isn't it? But it couldn't be further away from the truth, and this is what I'm going to try and say a little bit about today. So, I work for Letchworth Garden City Heritage Foundation. Those of you who have read Ebenezer Howard's work will remember that he talked about private company building his experiment garden city, then a community trust which will then look after it and run it for the benefits of the local community. And that's what we do. We're a community benefit society in new money, and we basically reinvest surplus from the garden city estate back into the local community. We do that by way of funding and promoting various activities which help and support the local community. And we don't provide any statutory services. We're all about additionality. So, of course, no talk of garden cities can take place without this great man. We don't quite queue up and bow to him in the mornings, but still what he said is absolutely relevant. Not a town planner, not an architect, but someone who cared and someone who had life experience and was very well read, spoken to a lot of people, and there was a group of people around him. And he wrote this book in 1898. And there was nothing really new in it, but it was the way it was presented that it really captured the imagination of people. But he was trying to tackle these issues. And isn't it a shame that we still have these issues today? People living in poor quality housing, unsafe housing, paying huge rents, and none of that value generated from those rents benefiting the local community. And that is unfortunately what we have today. So we all know these diagrams, so I won't spend very long talking about them. The diagrams at Ebenezer Howard, I have his sketches somewhere, which showed what he was thinking. So a regional planning model. Do you remember when we used to have regional planning based on a city, a central conurbation? These series of garden cities, interconnected, each up to a maximum size, which will provide housing, but also assist in the regeneration of the inner city. As people decant out, then that allows regeneration. And that's what kind of happened with the Newtown movement. Then, of course, combining the best of town and country. And I would say if anyone at any future point does a tender submission to my organisation, please don't put this in because we do see it an awful lot. But it still applies. It's still valuable, combining the best of town and country. And there's been lots of modern interpretations of that. And it still absolutely applies today. So when we talk about Letchworth, I like to always say that Letchworth is a vibrant, living economy. It is not a museum piece. We have 33,000 people who live there and 15,000 people who work there. It's kind of met the sort of population that Ebenezer Howard was talking about. But we think there's opportunities for growth. But what we won't do is we won't prejudice those original core principles. In particular, we could easily develop all of our industrial estate. We're half an hour away from King's Cross, half an hour away from Cambridge on the train. That would be very easy for us to do so, but we think that core value of having sustainable local economies to support the community remains relevant. So we talk about garden city principles. I hear garden city principles mentioned an awful lot. Now, you'll see on that list there, the rough cast render and chimneys isn't included on the list. It's a social, community and economic model. It's not a particular form of architecture. Yes, the arts and crafts architecture in Letchworth is beautiful. It works very well and it certainly has its place. And that simple approach to design is absolutely relevant. The tree-lined corridors I would advocate on any new master plan. but it is a social, community and economic model. And it's all about innovation. And if anyone has read Ebenezer Howard's work, he talks about embracing new technologies. He talks about being innovative. He talks about community involvement. And I think today you can see in Letchworth still examples of the original master plan where there was community land trusts, there was co-housing, there was all of these type of models that we're talking about today, and there was also self-build. But the most important of those principles, I would say, is around governance and stewardship and capturing value for the benefit of the local community. And that's what I'm going to say a little bit about today. So one of the key lessons, I think, around stewardship is that Section 106 and SEAL isn't going to do this. And it's so frustrating when we get approached. We advise various developments across the country, and it's half built, and they say, oh yes, can you tell us what stewardship model we should apply? Well, it's too late. And let's learn from the Garden City Society. Let's learn from Letchworth. They had the stewardship model in place before they'd even thought about looking for a site. And if you read Howard's work, it's a lot of number crunch about how you can administer long-term stewardship models, because we've seen some beautiful examples of housing and some less good examples of housing. But unless you've got that stewardship model in place in 20, 30, 40 years' time, you can forget it, because they will look rubbish. And if you see what happened to the new towns, where the new towns had their stewardship model in place and then it was taken away from them, through the changes and change of approach in central government, you can now see the problems that local authorities are facing. Harlow, for example, swathes and swathes of open space which they can't afford to look after. Now, there are innovative solutions, and then go back to what Howard said. Howard said, look at food production. Use your open spaces in a meaningful way. That is actually a way of stewarding them. But you have to have those models in place. Now, what we've done in Letchworth, and we're the only garden city who's managed to preserve this, is that we have a long-term model. We have a commercial portfolio, and that commercial portfolio generates rent, and then we reinvest it back in. And I've got some diagrams to show that. No person in Letchworth pays a service charge to what we do. It's all funded by that management of an endowment income. And there are other models. Look at the Parks Trust at Milton Keynes that apply similar concepts. But you have to set it up before. You can't say to a developer halfway through the build, or even on grant and planning permission, oh, by the way, we need this endowment income from somewhere. It's too late. It's got to be set out there before, and then it is less painful. So in terms of how we do it in Letchworth, so we have this income, we have a portfolio, and then that's reinvested roughly under these headings, but there's an Act of Parliament that says where we can invest this sum that we get in each year. And these are the headings in the Act of Parliament. So the reality of it is we now have a portfolio worth about £155 million, predominantly commercial property, all in Letchworth. And those of you who work in investment property would go, you are crazy to have all your portfolio in one town, and that's something which I think we need to tackle in the future. That brings in around £10 million in rent, and then we're able to reinvest that surplus. So we act very commercially. So our commercial rents are competitive. We're able to give charity rents to organisations, but basically we act in a commercial way. Slightly schizophrenic organisation. We're getting best value on one side, so we can reinvest it on the other. But also, in order to administer this, you have to have the power vested in the local community. Ebenezer Howard spoke about the community taking these important local decisions. Now, the way that that's done is we have a community governance structure where we have 30 trustees. We have an election every 5 years to choose some of them. Local groups, clubs, societies choose some, and then we appoint others, or the governors appoint others to meet particular skill sets. They then choose their board of trustees, which they choose 7 from amongst themselves, and then you have a governor representing the county council and a governor representing the district council. There is no developer involvement in that structure. It's all about the local community. They're vested with managing that endowment income. And I'm fortunate enough to be part of the executive team. I make recommendations, but I cannot make any decisions as to where that money's spent. It's all resting with those trustees. So in terms of the reality of how that works, well, this is a year old actually. It was a little bit more last year. So we invest around between 4 and 5 million, depending on how our portfolio is done, a year, back into the community through additional facilities, services. So For example, we have our own hospital. We have a treatment centre outside the National Health Service, GP referrals, so generally for older people, and they get those free services for the local community, all because of this long-term stewardship model. We have our own cinema, we have a theatre, an arts and community centre. You wouldn't get these in a town of the size of Letchworth, and certainly not at the subsidised rate we provide it. A family farm, so children can learn where their food comes from. Every child gets free entry to local schools. Shop mobility, very small local community level activities. Museum services. All of these type of activities which provide additional benefit to the town. No older person in Letchworth needs to be on their own, because we have a community minibus service that we fund, and we drag them out even if they don't want to go out. You can see them being dragged down their driveways. No, come on, it's good for you, you need to get out. But we provide those services for the local community at no cost. Not means tested. If you live in Letchworth or you work in Letchworth, you can benefit from those services. And we have a series of grants where we reward people who perhaps are struggling a little bit financially but are talented. Through, we give pay for musical instruments, pay for one lad has recently become a professional footballer, couldn't go to training because his parents had no money. We pay for him to go to training, pay for equipment, all of these type of things. Every older person gets a Christmas meal to local clubs. Lots of support to various different groups, but also provide debt advice through the CAB, dementia care through local housing associations. The full range from a grant of £30 to a grant of £100,000. All of these type of things we're able to do because Ebenezer Howard said, keep the land, capture the value and reinvest it for the benefit of the community. So the other thing that we also have as part of our stewardship model, just very quickly to finish, is we have a management scheme. Now, we're not unique in that. We are joined by Bourneville, Port Sunlight, Welwyn Garden City, Hampstead Garden Suburb, these other places. We have a management scheme. It's an addition to planning permission. And it's by covenants. And my goodness, don't you get some power by having covenants, by protecting freehold. I was in court 2 weeks ago on a legal injunction, and we have some powers which our trustees didn't even dream of that we had. And we've taken to task some house builders recently where they didn't build in accordance with our agreement, and they've had to rebuild it. Our scheme of management means that we can request or require applications for external alterations. Try not to be too draconian on this, but we protect the group. It's all about the group. Letchworth doesn't have splendid standalone buildings. It's all about the group of the arts and crafts architecture. And we could do that through protecting front hedges, trees, windows, hard stands, all of those type of things. And this is the type of thing that we're able to protect. So through a long-term vision, a long-term plan. So these houses on the left are social housing. Letchworth was designed to be tenure blind. And my goodness, don't you see some shocking schemes when you see, oh, there's the affordable, there's the private. Let's design tenure blind. For goodness sake, we were doing it in 1903. Why can't we do it now? And let's preserve some of these key attributes. And what it does, it adds value. And that's the great thing about this. Stewardship models, indeed, make homes more marketable, particularly if they don't involve a huge service charge. So it's to everyone's benefit. So that's me done. But all I would like to say is, if anybody would like to come along, bring councillors, colleagues, members of staff, developers, whoever it might be to Letchworth, it's not perfect. And please don't take away from this that Letchworth's perfect, because it's not. We've got our challenges, as the case with every town. But there are some lessons which we hope can be learnt, which we hope will be of value to the future. Lovely. Thank you very much.
David, that was fantastic. We were designed